So we are thrilled to welcome Zaha Hadid at the London Interview Marathon. And to begin with the beginning, actually, we wanted to ask you about London, because some years ago we spoke about London, and you were telling me that for you it's almost an unrealized project. London is the city as an unrealized project. I was wondering what would be your assessment sort of London now in 2006?
I think it's still an unrealized project for me. It's kind of, but I still think it's a very exciting city because it's not so predictable. Maybe it's more predictable before, but it's not every time you think you know it extremely well. There is a kind of a degree. There's a surprise about what you might come across, and I think that also shifts your opinion about what you might do there constantly. So there is in that sense, I still find it kind of an educational situation for me.
Yeah, do you have another follow-up question? There's a problem that we know each other very well, and that I'm
too well for comfort,
and that I follow your career very closely. So I think the questions I would like to ask you are kind of more intimate in a certain way. So if you don't want to answer,
that's okay.
I would completely understand. I think your career is at a kind of very interesting moment that actually very few people reach, where you have to decide whether to repeat things or whether to continue to innovate.
Well, I think I'm in a position now where I can do both. Mm-hmm. I think that there are things which, as you well know, one can kind of use as a generic project. Huh. And I think also there's still an excitement about inventing things. So I don't think one precludes the other.
Can you be specific? Can you give an example of a generic thing you use?
I think you can, for example, if you look at a project which is, I don't know which one it may be, but I'll take Rome for an example.
Where you take?
The Rome project, the Maxi project in Rome, where we're trying to kind of really make space through linear lines and how they separate and connect. One can look at that diagram in a variety of ways. You can apply it to maybe Rome, or you can apply it to the BMW production facilities, because that line has to do with that kind of site. So in terms of site, you can do things which could be generic, and not in terms of only program, but in terms of kind of the formal language. And on the other hand, I think that, I think in the years when we did endless work with not winning a single competition, that gave us an incredible possibility, a big repertoire that one can invent and also rely on one's own experience and previous inventions to do the next one. I don't think one can invent the wheel all the time, but as you well know, I think if I had not taken on that journey, which was thinking that one can unravel things, I think it would have been much more static for me a long time ago.
I have another question, and it's kind of not really related, but I'm totally fascinated because I'm now kind of for the first time working in the Arab world, and my entry there follows maybe by a year your entry in the Arab world. You're Iraqi, of course. You're not working in Iraq, but you're now working in Abu Dhabi and Dubai and in other places in the Arab world. What is your feeling about entering as an Arab in the Arab world at the moment of its maximum westernization?
I think it's very interesting. I entered the Arab world many years ago with a bridge in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, which has taken a long time to make, because they are literally knitting the steel as it comes along, because it's so expensive, but it's a knitting job. I don't want to be critical of the Arab world. The Arab world always favored foreigners, non-Arabs, because they had always a kind of a slight chip that those people are better informed than their own people, and which I think is not always accurate of the description. With the work, planning work which was done in Kuwait in the 60s and 70s, and the same with Iraq, there was a misconception. The same with Saudi Arabia. the work which was done in Lebanon, which is a very relevant story right now on the downtown, is also, I think, problematic. But I think there has been a recent shift, which is a combination of extreme westernization and a pride in the Arab entity. And I think I've entered the Arab world among this moment. That on one hand, I think that they like to hire an Arab now because they want to associate with someone who is, between brackets, successful within the eyes of the world, sort of thing. And on the other hand, I think that's a very, very interesting, because when I was in Dubai, I met with, the ruling family, with the rulers, and I didn't have the same feeling before about how, suddenly that is a possibility where it wasn't necessarily possible before.
And do you notice that there is some effect of Arabness in your work there? Or
I think that the effect of Arabness, as you call it, I think it coincides with certain interests right now in terms of, the whole landscape project, one can call it. I was, when I came, starting a long time ago, which is to do with dunes and stuff like that. That was the research originally. There's also interest in, ideas of pixelation and geometry, which relates a great deal to the Arab entity. In terms of algebra, mathematics, and geometry, which is very much connected. And I think suddenly one can kind of connect in terms of material and these kind of ideas. So I think there is a connection not only by me, but also there's an interest abroad in these ideas. Not forgetting the whole idea of the courtyard, and I think that could be reinvented again. So there is, I think the moment also connects these things together, and also on the work in the office.
So you think that there's, because I think that Dubai is usually caricatured in the same way that Singapore was caricatured kind of maybe 10 years ago as kind of in a way a place of excess, Disneyfication, etc., etc. But you think there's a deeper and more creative.
I think if one wants to test some extreme, I think one wants to test some extreme ideas, and that could be very interesting. And I think it's possible to do them there, and the more extreme the idea, the more that it is welcomed. So I think, and not because you want to make a kind of freak show, but I think even on the level of things which could actually make other places look at Dubai or progress the work. Because I think that it depends on the ambition of individuals and the office. Ambition is always to try to see what is the next thing one can break in terms of boundary, and what is my personal ambition as an architect, and how I can achieve an ideological or a theoretical project. Because ultimately that is, and I think it is possible to achieve some of that there at this moment.
Can you maybe tell us about some examples about the projects you're doing right now in Dubai or in the region, in terms of, your own practice, to which extent projects which here would not be possible are possible there?
No, I think they're possible in many places. I just think that the scale of the work is not always everywhere. Maybe it's possible in China, but maybe it's possible in parts of America. I talk about these towers we're doing in Dubai, which Ram was also working on. The scheme grew. It was already enormous. Now it's including a bridge and a stock exchange and museums, and so the scale I think is interesting. I think in terms of kind of an idea of a skyline, it is interesting. I think that people kind of have always there's a character about the Arabs anyway. They run around with dresses and they wear funny clothes, and people look at them in a strange way, and they are covered and stuff. But there was also a generosity of spirit there, which I think it was used in an interesting way in terms of the urban fabric and architecture. I think it could be very interesting. We are supposed to be doing also the Opera House in Dubai, which is an island. We don't know about that yet. We're supposed to do it, but I was also doing work in Beirut, in the downtown. But I think now with the situation there, it's kind of really the least of the problems.
Can you tell us about this project? That was a kind of a urban scheme for part of Beirut? Or?
No, I mean, I wish it would be an urban project, but I don't think it is, because I went to present it literally a month ago. One is a bank headquarters, and the other one is a building for the campus in AUB, where I studied many years ago. And they thought, I mean, in their discussion about the product, I don't think they meant to insult me, but because they adapted the idea of a perimeter block, which is really not appropriate for this city, because Beirut is not Berlin. So instead of making 1,000 blocks, they made 5 blocks. You know, so the scale is weird. And then we did a building which is not a perimeter block, necessarily it's perimeter, but not in terms of their eyes. So that they thought it was kind of, you know, it is frivolous in that case, because they I think started off wanting to do an American downtown, like Atlanta, and then they shifted to Berlin. And by doing that, they made Beirut into a tabula rasa, so it's a one flat plane, and while the city was much more layered, and they did not tap on in current discourses about complexity and different ways of dealing with urban renewal.
If I look at your career, I think that there is a first phase where your own signature, your own work, your own hand, your own brush is incredibly imaginative, inventive, and crucial to every single kind of project. And if you look at the firm now, and also at how the firm presents itself, it's a firm dedicated to digital production, and according to rumor, awesomely efficient in terms of working on enormous projects with relatively few people. And so very few people I know have succeeded this transition from being almost a miniaturist to a kind of hyper-modern and contemporary organization. So has it been as seamless as it seems? And have you lost something? Or what have you lost and what have you gained?
Well, I think it's very interesting, and I think that I was resisted the kind of digitization for a very long time. What I think is interesting that in a way, on the three-dimensional work, it was not so complicated because the computing almost imitated, I hate to say, the work we did. And so it was an interesting transition. It's less complex, it's less transparent, and it's much more opaque and more, let's say, real. So I still think that the work which was done in terms of graphic representation and in terms of that research, in a way, original period was much more complex and less predictable. But on the other hand, I think when we were 10 people, we were almost 30 people, because we worked, you know, like 3 shifts. You know, so when we are now 150 people, we are 450 people. And it's a very interesting, you know, not because the people work extremely hard, but because I think, as I said, you know, the days and the years when we were locked up in Bowling Green Lane with nobody paying attention to us, we all did tremendous amount of research, and I think it gave us tremendous ability to reinvent or to work on things. Also, I think what was also interesting, that even young people, you know, I can't generalize, but even people who come in with no experience, I think if you give them enough confidence, as you well know, and faith, they actually can be as good as somebody who has, you know, 30 years experience or 20 years experience. And there are the right people around to guide them and to, but I think I've always noticed that, I mean, as you well know, the most important trick in this business is to be able to delegate. You know from very early on, you can't do everything yourself. You can do bits of it yourself. You can make people do things the way you want them done, but you have to rely on also their own invention and all their own kind of talent and abilities. So and I think that teamwork was very important to me for a long time. It's contrary to kind of common, you know, stories that it's not. I've always believed in it, and I think that's why it is manageable.
Yet there are things that only you can do. What would you say you concentrate on now?
I think my main ability is you know, well, I'm always kind of, I was in a car with somebody in my office, and I said, he said, you're too fast, I can't write everything you're saying, and I can't do whatever you're saying me to do. I said, you know, I'm on a lolly, you know, meaning I'm on a roll, you know, so I said, you know, so it says, there's certain things which I don't think I can do particularly anything better than others. I can see things when I focus very clearly with no confusion. I can confuse people, but I don't confuse myself. That is the great advantage I have. So I might you know, send you off in hours of confusion, but I am quite focused. But I can do very well plan organization. I mean, I'm very good at that. And also thinking, obviously, always of things which are not always predictable in terms of what I would do with a project. I still think I do that well. And I can now also be charming.
Reach what?
Be charming.
Be charming.
You know, people used to think I'm not charming, so.
Talking about charming, I mean,
Not to you, Aram.
there's
I've never tried it with you, but.
There's equally kind of two periods in your life. One now where you're honored, and a previous life where you were neglected, not to say insulted. Are there parts of that current condition that you find painful, and of the previous life that you relished?
I mean, I think that when I was neglected or ignored, it was, I always thought that it would be a passing period, you know, whatever. But it was, you know, there were moments, I think, when I felt extremely down, and, but my depression doesn't last very long. You know, I'm fundamentally an optimist, and I think, you know, I always think that, you know, one will eventually come out of that situation. I don't take the honor, unfortunately, terribly seriously. I mean, I think it's fantastic, and I'm very grateful for it, or happy to have it, but I don't take it as seriously as it kind of affects my life. Mm-hmm. So, in that sense, you know, it's kind of almost even. I mean, it's difficult to believe, but I've tried not to. I mean, I think, you know, you have to really, when there are good moments, you have to know what they are and enjoy them, and you know, that's it.
And that leads maybe also to a more general question, because Rem was asking you about the sort of current moment in relation to your own practice. I wanted to extend the question and ask you if you could sort of tell us a little bit about how you assess the sort of current moment right now in the world, and how you see the kind of present moment.
I must say, I'm still, I think for me it's a very interesting moment. I still think, despite all, it's still very difficult for women to operate in this as a professional. You know, there are worlds which you can't, you know, enter into, sort of thing. So, on the other hand, you know, I can do almost what I want, you know, and in that sense, so that's kind of good, but not from the office point of view. The office does not let me do what I want. I mean, so I'm still kind of, in practice, still practice resistance all the time. And I think it keeps you on the go, you know, so it's not that, you know, I'm there and everybody says yes to me everywhere. It's not the case. So it's still a struggle, despite, you know, having gone through it 100 times, there is still a struggle, and I don't think it's necessarily always great, but I think it keeps you in place, and it also makes you, you know, think about things in a different kind of way, and do them in a different kind of way.
There's many more questions, but maybe Rem, you have.
No.
Because I mean, we could bring it back also to London, and as one of the sort of ideas of this marathon was to kind of try the impossibility of the possibility of kind of have a portrait of the city, and we are somehow thinking it could be interesting to hear from you more about if there is such a thing as a theory about London, and what would it be?
I mean, I think that, you know, the whole theory about London was always about that a city which kind of is made of many villages which converge into each other, and then kind of reached certain areas of density and a metropolitan kind of condition. and also the areas. I mean, we did a product which was very interesting more than 20 years ago at the AA, where we drew lines through London, and we traveled on these lines, and that was a very interesting project because it showed from, first of all, it showed some...
Which project was this? Was
done with the school at the AA years ago. And it was interesting that certain things align with each other, and certain things, when you jump from one neighborhood to the other, they tremendously varied. And that's what made this city very, on one hand, has a domestic matrix, but on the other hand, these areas varied in terms of, their looks and beauty and color and so on. So, and also their kind of, so I think that has become much more homogenized. But I still think there are major gaps in the city which allows for a major and urban intervention of an interesting scale. And I think the scale is interesting here, which nobody kind of takes on, whether it's on this, whether they want to look at the whole of the South Bank as one project, the whole of the South Bank, or to look at kind of areas where you can intervene, and not in an extremely serious way, but in a way which actually allow a degree of kind of lightness to come into the city, because I think all the new development is very heavy-handed and not light in terms of what could be. Yeah. And I think it's still a fortified city. I still think that the main project that is a generic project is an urban perimeter block, and I think that could also change.
No, you go.
Can you tell us about because you actually, when you said about London and the unrealized, but you actually now for the first time realizing a project in London in terms of a permanent building. Can you tell us about this?
Well, I mean, we're doing the foundation building, and I mean, I wouldn't call that a major project. It's a very small thing behind the Tate, and I'm not saying that against the Tate nor against anything, but it's a very tiny intervention. It's maybe the size of a pavilion, which is nice. And the other one, which is the aquatic center, the pool for the Olympics, which hopefully goes ahead, and that's another project. But I have an interest in really looking at something in the city if remotely possible.
Recently...
The Olympic is also an interesting, the whole project is an interesting thing.
You want to say something about it? In the space of almost 1 week, there have been 2 pyramids launched. Yours for the Architecture Foundation and the pyramid for the Tate.
Well, mine is an upside-down pyramid.
Yes, exactly.
I mean,
that's what I wanted to talk about, because you know the fountainhead. In the fountainhead, the kind of sign of genius, and I think that's the kind of genius of the set designer. The sign of genius is to design an inverted pyramid. And so this is your first inverted pyramid?
No, we had another product for the foundation. And we had to go through a major change to make a very simplified project, because the land security could not afford the original project. So it was a really what to do on that side. It's I always felt that I'm in front of three projects, which are three very large corporate kind of boxes behind the Tate, and the only thing you can do is to kind of do something looking like a kind of a flower in a way in front of these boxes, and so it came out as an inverted pyramid. I mean, as the other pyramid, I don't know. What do you think about the Tate project? It's another sign of genius.
Evidence of genius. Huh?
Evidence, okay.
Actually, we have a last question. With the risk of being repetitive, it's the only recurring question. I was wondering if you had any dreams, kind of projects for London, or any kind of projects you'd like to, unrealized projects you'd like to see happen in the future?
I still think, London always kind of arouses kind of these projects which are not predicted. I mean, even if I look at the site for the Olympics, this was done in a drawing more than 15 years ago about how London should develop towards the east, but I still think that these projects are still possible. How to deal with the sites between, the festival hall and all these projects there. I mean, I think there's still quirky situations where it doesn't require. There's an obsession here about making everything look nice or feel nice, and I think niceness in London is not appropriate because it relies on kind of slight messiness. And I think if one can do a product which is not so even and, you know, clean, it would be more interesting than this idea of rectifying everything to be kind of more handleable.
Many, many thanks to Zaha.
Thank you.
Thank you very
so
much.
much.
Thank you. Sure.